Welcome to Notorious Women Podcast. I'm Lavetta.
I'm Miriam.
And this is Notorious Women. We are Notorious Women,
Yes,
a comedy podcast about some of history's most notorious women.
Yes. Okay.
How you doing today?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. You just have to... I had to say this. There's a spider I found yesterday and I took the Swiffer to kill it. I hate spiders, like a lot of people. Took the Swiffer to kill it, but it got away from me. So now I'm on edge because I'm like, where the fuck is it? So I've been thinking about it.
So it sounds to me like you're living in the spider's house. Like,
Yes.
This is not your house. You are paying an enormous amount of rent to live in the spider's house.
This is why you need a cat. Because a cat will find it and then bring it to me, kill it, and then bring it to me. Like, here you go, mommy.
Listen, I will tell you this. Having children does the same thing. Only it's much more expensive.
Yes.
But at this point, I see a spider. Go get it, baby. Go get it.
Oh, man.
Mommy's sitting
That's
on
right.
the couch now. Can't move. So
I'm one of those kids. My luck, I have a kid that likes bugs. I'll be like,
No, I did have that phase, and we had to be like, we sent it to a better place, and
Yeah.
we're so sad that it cannot continue living in this house with us. Goodbye.
like hamsters, and yeah, that's true. Like those things that die easily.
No.
Fish.
The child liked the ants. The child liked the bugs, and was like, "You're not killing
no.
the ant, are you?" And you're like, "No."
It's going to ant heaven
It's going to ant
with the
heaven.
other ants.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Well, I am, but I'm hanging in there, and
Good.
excited to be here for another episode. Should we get started?
Let's get started. All right.
I believe this week you are first, my dear. So,
me.
Because
Yeah.
I went first last week. What do you have for me? Who's your notorious woman this week?
My notorious woman is someone I had never heard of until I started looking for. I was wondering. Here, I'll tell you who it is, and then you'll see where I got.
Are you? I feel
We'll
like
start with her, and then we'll go on the journey with me. Okay.
Okay.
Mamie Smith. Have you heard of Mamie Smith?
Sounds very familiar. It just sounds like a very familiar Southern name. I can't even lie. Mamie
Right.
Smith.
But so it turns out she's someone we should have known about. Okay. So she was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1891. But everywhere in the world, the year of her birth had been given 1883. But in 2018, they discovered her birth certificate. She was actually born in 1891. She was an American vaudeville singer, dancer, pianist, and actress.
Mm.
She was born in, so her mother was from Kentucky. Amanda Havey was her mother. Her father was Benjamin Robinson, and he was a porter, and he was from Canada. So they lived in Cincinnati, born on 14 Perry Street. And there are two separate birth records with the same birth date, the same parents, the same address, and the same midwife. And they think that her name was actually Mary R. So she was 10 years old when she started working for vaudeville.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why were there two birth certificates?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And
They kept
I'm not
records,
sure.
Probably.
Yeah. And she's black and
And Mamie Smith or Mary Smith is not an uncommon name?
No, but same parents.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, you did say that. That's weird.
Which is, I find it odd. I also find it odd that honestly, like there's, oh God, I got information from a place called Friends of the Music Hall. Is that what it's called?
Oh, okay.
It's like friendsofmusichall.org. Everywhere else, they said 1883. So I don't know. The records were messy. So when she was 10, she found work touring with a white act. called The Four Dancing Mitchells. And as a teenager, she danced in Salem Tut Whitney's Smart Set. So the Smart Set company was a prominent black vaudeville company. They were producers, they were the writers, they were the performers. At the time of vaudeville, fun fact, working for white people when you were black was not all that great. I know. Yeah.
Wow, I'm shocked. I tell you.
I know. Nobody knew this until now. So here you go. Information for you. Write it down.
Okay.
And so, but what they did was there was a lot of them, a lot of companies that said, okay, fine, we'll tour on our own. We will run it. It'll be our thing. And vaudeville was actually very conducive to that because it was your own thing and you could join another group of people or you could have your own tours. And it was very popular. When she was in the Smart Set company at age 16, she met and married fellow performer Sam P. Gardner. It is amazing. She is touring at 10. I have no idea where her parents are.
I mean, kids have to fend for themselves, especially if you're black and poor.
And back in the day, and she's clearly very talented.
Yeah.
So, off you go,
She could have been traveling with a family friend, play cousin, as we would say, who might be who also a performer, because I think people don't realize that, Black and Jewish people got into performance because it's one of the few ways you can make a living without having to be a servant or be, subject to prejudice.
In those days, that's how a lot of Black and a lot of Jewish people got out of the slums, right?
Yep.
Of bad situation.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, she did what she had to do. And for all accounts, she was fine,
I wonder what her act was at 10.
That's what I wonder too. Like, she was 10 and like a little Black girl touring with a white act. What?
Ooh, I bet they put her in blackface.
I'm nervous.
Yeah. She probably was in blackface, which was the norm. I know it's hard for us to believe in our modern society, but even Black performers were forced, if they wanted to eat, they wanted to work, were forced to do blackface during that time. But it's more legitimate work, even though performers were considered kind of like the dregs of society, but still, like, for them, like, it's like having your own business, right? Like, I heard this podcast, another podcast, and they were saying how these Black women after the Civil War, they were washerwomen, which is a very brutal job, but many of them preferred it to working in white homes because they were business women. They had their own businesses and could set their own, schedules.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And, well, in entertainment, there's that possibility of going above and beyond.
Yep.
And really making a living.
Yeah.
But the
and
idea
you were getting paid more as a performer than you would be as a maid or a washerwoman. So,
right. Yeah. So they went
it's
through
just
lot.
keeping as we know, as trained actors, it's a matter of having steady work.
Yeah.
When you're getting paid, it's good. But if you're not getting paid a lot, that's why you go on tour. So
that's why you go. I've been on tour.
Yeah.
Do you know?
That's why
I play Tiny Tim.
Tiny.
Don't I look like a little boy, Lavetta? I don't know what's funny right now because
can I have some more, sir?
That's Oliver.
Hello. Oh, that's right, Oliver. That's right. Tiny Tim's.
I have played
Christmas Carol.
So many little boys
it's
in
all
my
Dickens.
career.
Okay.
So much
what
Dickens.
What does that say about your self-esteem when you're young?
You know what? I don't want to talk about it.
Hello, governor. That's my bad British accent.
That was really terrible. But I really enjoyed it at the same time.
Where people were like, oh, you have a great British accent. I'm like, hello. Can I have some more?
So did someone tell you had a great British accent? I'm just asking.
Hey. We won't get personal, right? No, now it's been like, what's up, brov?
Oh.
Hey, brov. That's
you really.
That's the modern equivalent of hello.
Oh, brov.
Do you want the smoke, bro? Like what?
I don't know what you're saying,
British
but I can
people,
listen to you all day.
Please don't hate us, British people. We love you.
Please
we
love
love
us.
your accents.
We
Yes.
do, and we're clearly jealous of it because we cannot
We're making
do
fun because it's
Yes.
because ours is terrible. So I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I digress.
can-
Go ahead.
No worries. They could clearly get us back.
But I was. Oh no, they do get us back with these terrible. You know how I feel about bad Southern accents. Like I'm like, why do you? Somebody, have you seen The Glass Onion?
I have seen The Glass Onion.
Someone was saying, what's his name? Daniel Craig's. Even the name is it's a mystery comedy, so that's why I forgive the accent. But he's like Benoit Blanc, and he's like doing he's doing what's it? Foghorn Leghorn. I say, boy, I say, boy, listen to me when I'm talking to you. Like that is not a real Southern accent. People, you sound like the Colonel.
He's
I'll say.
It's like Benoit Blanc, though. Like it's not like an accent from anywhere, but Benoit land.
I know his name is Benoit Blanc. I'm like, people simmer down. Even I know it's a joke. It's funny. It's supposed to be funny. That's why he's doing that accent.
Yeah. I liked that movie.
I did too. I like it. And I enjoy Daniel Craig. I enjoy all the movies. I'm a big mystery person, so.
But it wasn't a history in how people speak in the South of America.
Yeah.
America. Yeah. You know what I'm saying. Yeah. Foghorn Leghorn. Okay, so she got married at 16. She divorced in 1912. And then traveled with a smart set to New York to perform at the Lafayette Theater. So when they got to New York, she decided to stay there. She honed her skills in cabarets, dozens of popular Harlem clubs. This was Harlem. I feel like this was the ascent of Harlem being the place of culture and art. Yeah,
because it started in like 1915, 1916 is when
it was
starting. 1912 actually, but it really swang into like
it
full
exploded.
On,
I mean, it was exploded in the 20s.
Yeah.
So in 1913, she left the Tut Brothers to sing in clubs in Harlem, and then married William Smitty Smith, who was a singer, and that's where she got her last name. Now, she married 2 more times in her life, but she liked Smith, so she kept it.
All right, Mamie, that's what I'm talking about, girl.
You know, she did what she had to do. Mm-hmm.
That's what you got to do.
In the summer of 1918, Mamie was hired by Perry Bradford, who was an actor, dancer, pianist, singer, and songwriter, to perform his compositions in the Harlem Lincoln Theater Review, Made in Harlem. Now, her rendition of his song Harlem Blues was the hit of the show, and he reworked it as Crazy Blues. So, knowing that he had a hit on his hands, Bradford convinced Frederick Hager, the white director of artists and repertoire, A&R, at OK Records, to take a risk on an African-American singer. Whew.
Oh.
I know, right? There was, obvious racist pushback. And he agreed to record his songs, but first he asked a white vaudeville singer, Sophie Tucker, who I've heard of. But she couldn't because she was under contract with Vocalion, and she couldn't record for OK. So between 1915 and 1917, there were only 4 vocal recordings with blues in the title. So there was Memphis Blues, Morton Harvey, Homesickness Blues, Nora Bayes, Paradise Blues, Marion Harris, and Dallas Blues, Marie Cahill. Now, you might not know this from their names, but they were all white people. So, that's fine. It's not, though. They were great, but they, quote, weren't as soulful as Mamie. Because they were white people.
I wonder why. Because, and just so people don't realize that it wasn't that there weren't blues singers, because blues comes from black people. It's that they were not being recorded.
They weren't being recorded. Exactly.
They weren't being recorded. And so it's kind of like if you've seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, that's her whole thing is like they're going to record our voices and then push us out. And that's what that is. So
that's what they did.
And that's what happened.
Yeah. So on February 14th, 1920, she recorded Bradford's, so this was a couple of years later, right? That Thing Called Love and You Can't Keep a Good Man Down, with the all-white house orchestra led by Fred Hager under the pseudonym Milo Rega. So this was the first recording by a black blues singer, which is kind of epic. The backing musicians were, however, were still all white because, you know. And Hager received threats from northern and southern pressure groups saying they would boycott the company if he recorded a black singer. But he did it anyways, and it was a commercial success. So this opened the door to record more black singers.
They're like, ooh, we can make money from the darkies.
Yep.
Because their music, funny thing, they sound better singing their own music than the white people do.
Isn't that bizarre? I mean, I never thought. I'm being very sarcastic. You cannot tell. It's like with gay marriage. I was like, you guys, how much money are they going to put into a wedding? Put your prejudice aside and make that money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, capitalism.
Capitalism. Yeah. But they always find a way to still distinguish it.
Do you know what I'm saying?
You're probably going to get to it.
Yeah. There's always a way, Lavetta.
It's always a way.
So the first record was marginally successful, as they said. So it was successful, but it wasn't like crazy.
Gangbusters, yeah.
Right. So 6 months later, on August 10th, 1920, her recording Crazy Blues with her hand-picked all-black jazz hounds was a runaway success.
I wonder why.
Can you figure out? Can you put 2 and 2 together to make 4? I don't know.
These darkies can play. They can really play their own music. I keep using that term, but you know that's what they were saying. Something worse.
Lavetta, you can say whatever you want, but I would never.
I tell you. It's insane. Racism is insane.
No, it is insane.
So stupid.
It's like, well, she was black, but everyone behind her is white, so it's fine.
Yeah, and then it's like, then she picks her own band, which makes sense in general. I'm like, oh my word, it sounds better. No, duh.
Really? Well, fuck me. All right. So 1 million copies were sold in less than a year.
Oof.
Many were bought by African Americans. There was a sharp rise in sales of, quote, race records. Remember this?
See, there it is. Remember I said they'll figure out a way to make the distinction.
Yep. I told you. I mean, you obviously knew. But they're like, that's fine. These are race records, which are different.
Yeah. Cool. Which are different. Yeah.
Wow. White people have such little self-esteem. It's so sad, really. Like, oh, honey, it's okay.
Exhausting.
Someone else can be better at you than something. And that.
Or let's not even get into that. Like, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, just enjoy it. You like it.
Yeah.
Like, just enjoy it.
Like, accept that they're allowed to be waiters now. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have heard bad things from very old people back in the day, but I won't get into that.
Yes.
Do you know they're allowed to be waiters? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
They even let him go to school now. What is?
It's just unbelievable. Do you know every college lets them in? Okay.
For now.
I mean, that's how the Jews got into colleges, right? It's the mafia, the Jewish mafia. I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad at the mafia in general, even though Italian people tend to hate black people. But that's a whole different story. But I understand why the mafia needed to happen. I don't agree with the
I don't like people
brothels and the murder and the
but I don't like that part of it. But that's how we got into college. I didn't know that till I was like 30.
Okay. Can you tell our audience exactly what you're referring to?
So I read a book, and if anyone knows more about this, please tell me. But basically, around the time of the Italian mafia doing what it was doing, aka like the Godfather stuff. I don't know the famous ones, right? I don't know that much, obviously, but
Al
there were
Capone.
Jewish. Yeah, those guys. There were Jewish mafias too. They actually worked side by side to some degree too, and it was, I mean, for the same reasons. Nobody. They needed to take care of their own, and one of the things that the Jewish mafia targeted were universities, and said we need to let our children go to universities. And so you think of the educated Jewish stereotypical, you will go to college. It kind of stems from that. It was all white people, and then suddenly we could be let in. So,
it's kind of like how I always think of the Kennedys, like Joe Kennedy, the patriarch made his money off of bootlegging.
Yeah.
People don't realize that. And then he was like, oh, because the Kennedys are considered blue bloods, right? But it's like, no. But it's like, but he's like, I'm going to do this dirty work, but I'm going to make money. And then I use that money to invest in legitimate things. And then my son becomes president. These are Irish people, right? Like Irish American people.
I mean, that's the thing is, I don't even knock it, right? It's not
not at all. Much respect.
The Jews should honor it. We had to do what we had to do. And I think the narrative is that, Jews are really smart, and that's what happened. No, they're not smarter than anybody else. Well, you know what I mean?
You have to demand your way in. It's even in bootlegging, and I know about that in the Black community, because it's if you cut off avenues to success for people, they're going to figure out a way one way or another, right?
Yeah, they are. They're
going to figure out a way.
That's human nature. It's
and for a lot of Black people, they'll be like, Black people are naturally musical, and it's no, that's one of the few areas, like you're saying, Mamie Smith, where they can make progress.
Yep.
Because the white people are like, oh, they're musical, and it's well, first of all, it's an art form that came out of that, that difficulty. But then it's one of the few ways that they can make it, like we were saying with Mamie and other Black women, you go on the road, you can make way more money than what you were relegated to being a washerwoman or a maid, which, was hard work and paid a lot less and was a lot less glamorous. There's also the glamour element.
And also we want what we want. You and I know the feeling of wanting to perform.
Yeah, you want to entertain. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this was an avenue that was possible.
Yep.
Okay. Not everything. But
even in that, they're oh, we'll let them do music. We'll record them, but it's race records.
Oh God. Guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So Perry Bradford, I was where am I? Became her manager. He organized tours for her and scheduled future recording sessions. He started his own publishing and music management business, and he made a small fortune off of her.
Yeah, I bet.
So African Americans had been, I'm saying African Americans because that's what Wikipedia says. Also the Friends of Music Hall, but
okay.
Yeah. There were recordings earlier, but George W. Johnson in the 1890s, but they were performing music that had a substantial following among European American audiences. So they weren't recording their own music.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
So they did allow...
because I was going to say, I think there was an earlier recording, but
yes.
That distinction is different. Okay.
But Black American music that came from Black America.
Black American people, yeah.
I think that's huge because that's honoring
the blues and jazz. Mm-hmm. It turns into jazz and then turns into popular music, or even ragtime.
I love ragtime.
Yep.
I also love the musical Ragtime.
Yes.
Okay.
I know a lot of people are but it's important to know where stuff comes from.
It is important to know where stuff comes from.
Yeah.
So the Crazy Blues was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame because of its historical significance in 1994. 1994.
When was it recorded again?
Okay, it was 1920. August 10th, 1920.
Took 74 years. 74 years.
Could my eye roll get bigger? I don't think
Wow.
so. And it was selected for preservation in the National Recording Registry of the Library of Congress in 2005. Progress. Okay, sorry. Getting
Miriam,
it together. Yeah.
can you sing it?
What?
Look on your face. It's like, what?
Like, what ragtime song would you like me to sing? I'm ready.
No, I'm talking about Mamie's song. What is it called again?
Girl, I can't sing. Crazy Blues.
Crazy Blues. Crazy Blues. Crazy Blues. Crazy Blues. I'm crazy about that man. No, that's country.
That's very country. But it was a really good attempt, and you tried so hard.
Oh,
and for that, I give you so much credit.
We're sorry, Miss Mamie Smith. We're sorry.
You can listen to some of her recordings online.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Go. She's amazing. Like, surprise, obviously. But it's cool because it's like that same, you see the spark. Yeah. Like, it still translates, and there's such old recordings, but it's cool. Cool. So she continued to make popular recordings for OK through the 1920s. In 1924, she made 3 releases for Ajax Records, which was heavily promoted, but it didn't sell as well. She also made some records for Victor. So do you remember like the Victor talking machine company? This takes me back to Singing in the Rain, which I love. That movie, totally not related to anything we're talking about. So thank you for listening. And they made phonographs and they made recordings.
So I would imagine also with the explosion of that, success of that, then that opens the door for where they go out and they start looking for people like Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith. And then, which it then becomes popularized, right? Like, so Mamie's like the spark.
I really always... Exactly. I always thought of Bessie Smith as the one who opened up the floodgates, but this actually, she came before Bessie.
Yeah.
And they were sort of contemporaries. So Mamie toured the U.S. and Europe with her, it's like Mamie Smith and her jazz hounds. So it was her people that she picked as part of Mamie Smith's Struttin' Along Review. She was billed as the Queen of the Blues, which was soon one-upped by Bessie Smith, who was called the Empress of the Blues.
But I wonder, though, because especially in Black musical circles, it's Ma Rainey is the Queen of the Blues, actually. And I wonder if Mamie just got recorded first because Ma was older and had been traveling around. Because, Ma Rainey made a lot of money. Traveling around on her train.
Yes.
So touring.
I mean, I saw the movie.
And in the movie, she's reluctant to record. So I wonder what forced her to record was the success of, it certainly was the success of Bessie, who by all accounts was her prodigy. But like, if Mamie beats her to the punch, and I wonder if Ma is like,
I think Mamie is just a few years earlier. She's just... breaking
of recording, but probably well, definitely not performing.
And Mamie was in the time and place, met the guy who said, no, this song now,
exactly.
Exactly. So sometimes it's just, time and place, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So she realized that radio provided a great means of gaining additional fans. So she performed on KGW in Portland, Oregon in early May 1923 and received positive reviews. Through this touring, she became very wealthy. She was one of the very few successful Black performers that made this level of money.
Yeah. Good for her.
I know, right? She made $1,000, which is $13,000 today for weekly performances.
Wow.
Between 1920 and 1931, she earned an estimated $100,000. That's $1.3 million in today's money. In royalties from the 95 songs recorded. Her dresses, she was very big into fashion. They were from New York and Paris. and they received, this says, as much attention as her singing. Fashion designer Madame Hammer created Mamie Smith's stage gowns specifically, quote, fitting the individuality of the star and the various songs which she sings on her program. The Dayton Daily News said the audience hoped to see her dresses in a concert there at Memorial Hall, including her favorite, made of white silk trimmed with silver and American Beauty roses, with an ostrich feather headdress and fan to match. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I
also, now that you're saying that, I wonder if she physically is more appealing than Ma Rainey. Because like I said, to Black people, Ma Rainey is the queen of the blues. Yeah. Like, so Mamie is more aesthetically like pleasing and accepting and able to be accepted by mixed audiences and white audiences. And then also Bessie, because Bessie's younger than, that explains a lot. But good for her.
Yeah, like and she knew it. And also like this was her, I think she was a performer on every level, right? She wanted to show, she loved the costumes. She loved the singing. You can see her. Everyone go watch the video. She's just got, she embodies it. There's a quote from her. She says, I feel my audiences want to see me becomingly gowned, and I have spared no expense or pains in frequenting the shops of the most fashionable modistes in America, with a result that I believe my audience will like as much as I do, for I feel that the best is none too good for the public that pays to hear a singer. I mean, I feel the same way.
Yeah,
right?
Like give them a show.
The people that I see should see me dressed accordingly, and so I should buy nice clothes. That feels right.
Yeah, like, right? And also, I see. Yeah,
I just want to go shopping.
She's glamorous and yeah.
So this is fun. This is just like a fun fact. So in 1923, an article in the Pittsburgh Courier, a reporter got backstage to talk to her and asked her how she spent her leisure hours. She, quote, declared she enjoyed the quiet of her New York home and was very fond of fiction. But her husband and manager, Ossie Wilson, now she's married to a man named Ossie Wilson, chimed in laughing and said, the thing she likes to do above everything else in the world is to drive that Lincoln machine of hers, and really, I have never seen a more skillful woman driver. She has been driving 3 years and has only had one accident, and that occurred when she ran the car into me one day. I'm still wondering, though, if that really was an accident. Just to be clear, that was not her last husband. That was her third to last husband.
Okay, Mamie. Yeah. My kind of lady.
I should say second to last. Anyways, also, what a good driver for a woman. That's nice.
That's what I heard in that. No wonder that's why he's her ex-husband. He becomes her ex-husband.
It probably wasn't an accident, Ossie. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so she died in New York in 1946, reportedly penniless. Because she lost, so this is what it says. She lost almost everything in the crash of 1929. So there's an article in the Chicago Defender that says she lived off charity of friends until her death. It says she was penniless, but she was also married to Jack Goldberg. So she found a Jew in 1929 and appeared in an early sound film, Jailhouse Blues, in that same year. She retired from recording and performing in 1931, but then returned to performing in 1939 to appear in the motion picture Paradise in Harlem, which was produced by her husband, Jack Goldberg. She also appeared in other films, including Mystery and Swing in 1940, Sunday Sinners, 1940 also, Stolen Paradise, 41, Murder on Lenox Avenue, 1941, and Because I Love You, 1943. So I'm a little like penniless, but she's making all these movies.
Yeah. And also I wonder, because, as a performer, which we've learned with the pandemic, if you have a job or a business that's dependent on in person.
Yes.
And then like the crash. So let's say the crash happens, right? Almost everybody loses their money. So people don't have money to pay you to perform. So then let's say couple of years after that. And then I'm wondering if a lot of early black performers didn't own their publishing.
See, that's what I'm wondering also is what happened between those years, 1931 and 1939. How was she living?
Because she probably wasn't able to make the same amount of money from touring, because even today artists, singers make their money mostly from touring.
Yes.
But like, you're right, the penniless part still doesn't make sense, because I would imagine that she certainly doesn't have as much money as she once had before the crash. But then if she's also married and her husband sounds like he was a man of business, and like,
yes, he was producing all these movies. Now I understand that back then movies didn't make necessarily the level. But penniless doesn't
sound right. Yeah. Sounds like she had a couple rough years. Yeah, like everyone else and after the crash. And then
it's probably not penniless, but she's probably no longer a millionaire or 100,000-aire, which today's.
Or, in furs and stuff. So.
Right. Normal clothing. Yeah. But also, too, they might not have paid her what she was worth during.
Yeah, she probably, I wonder if she probably wasn't getting paid the publishing like she was supposed to.
No.
That's like,
I mean, we still
that's
see
still
those
a problem.
Lawsuits. Yes. Oh my God.
That's like a problem in 2023.
Yes.
So.
So she was interred at Frederick Douglass Memorial Park on Staten Island, which it remained unmarked until 2013. A monument was finally erected. There was a campaign, that's the word I'm looking for, to erect a headstone for her. It was begun in 2012 by Michael and Anne Fanciullo Calla. The couple, which was a blues journalist and editor, developed a months-long crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. We all know Indiegogo. Remember Indiegogo?
Yeah.
To purchase her headstone. And the philanthropy Music Cares also supported the effort. They raised over $8,000, and that funded the creation of a 4-foot-high etched granite headstone featuring an image of the late blues singer. A monument was erected with great fanfare at Frederick Douglass Cemetery in Staten Island, New York, on September 20th, 2013. Excess funds from the campaign were donated to the cemetery for grounds care. So Mamie Smith, they say of her, she defined classic blues. Her success inspired and empowered generations of performers and helped establish the preeminence of Black traditions in popular culture. She and her manager, Perry Bradford, pioneered the first recordings designed, advertised, and sold to Black communities. And that's what created the quote-unquote race records. Which I suppose was like better than nothing, right? Like, that it was a huge
it created opportunities for Black performers who could, it's kind of like stage performers who get into Hollywood pictures. Like by the time they make it to Hollywood pictures, they're like, it's old hat, but they get to make a lot more money than they were on the stage.
Exactly. But I was actually looking at I was like, oh, Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, and then I was like, oh, I don't even know her.
Yeah, I've heard of her. Mamie Smith sounds very familiar, but I didn't know that in reference to who we do know, Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. And
right.
And so, and also because Ma Rainey, her profile was raised again in the 80s with the play.
The play, Ma Rainey's
because so she, and then Bessie Smith, because Bessie Smith was a character I feel like a lot of white historians really love. So that's why a lot of us know about Bessie. And so, because I learned about Bessie before Ma Rainey. So
I learned about Bessie Smith because when I first moved to New York City, Virgin Records was still this huge thing in the middle of Times Square. And they had everything. And I loved it. I was like, finally, things that I'm not, like, I'm 20 and I'm slowly realizing that the history I was taught was wrong, that a lot of things were, so buying books off the street. And I'm looking in like and for whatever reason, a Bessie Smith CD. Remember CDs? Yeah, that's how old I am.
CDs and records.
CD. Listen, it wasn't a tape, which it could also have been. Because I'm that old. Okay. And I just bought it randomly. And I remember like going home and listening to it and being like, she's amazing. But I hadn't heard of her.
Right.
Because I didn't know anything. Right.
Well, I learned more about, like I had heard you, like as a Black person, you hear about these famous Black people because, you know, depending on where you go to school, you hear these names, but sometimes you don't know the context in which they existed. So like in college, I really got into Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, who I'd heard of, but I didn't really know. And then I was like, these women are amazing.
They're incredible.
Like, why aren't they? But it's interesting when you're a young person, you can go back, which now you want to feel old sometimes. I was listening to something and some kid didn't realize that Queen Latifah was a rapper first.
Oh, God. Because she's an actress.
I was like, yeah, because Queen Latifah was a
Queen Latifah
rapper before it. Like, but then you realize because that's old, that's history to them.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's not even that old. So like, yeah, if you go back and you learn about people, because like, you know, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald were the 40s and the 50s, and then I discovered Nat King Cole, but I knew of Nat King Cole from like old movies. But then I'm just like, oh my God. And then the Nicholas brothers. And so like,
yes, who are amazing. Like P.S. while you're like watching where you're YouTubing Mamie Smith, YouTube the Nicholas brothers. They're incredible and ridiculous.
Yeah. Like, so when people are like, the talent is gone, I'm like, there was always talent there. It's about opportunities and like exposure, right? Like there's people now who are amazing that we don't know that much about, who don't have the exposure.
So many, probably most.
There's because also it's and I think it's better now because of social media and the internet, because now you can put your own stuff out there.
That's true.
You know,
that is very true.
But Mamie Smith, thank you so much. I've heard the name, but I didn't understand the context, and so
we learn. Yay.
We learn. Right. That's what we're here for. Well, so now, this week, my Notorious woman, you've heard of her, but same thing. You probably don't know that much about her. My Notorious woman this week is Caroline Astor.
Okay. I know her Caroline? Because of The Gilded Age. We're best friends.
Yes. So,
I've only seen 3 episodes. Anyways, go on.
Oh, okay. It gets a little bit better. I'm hoping season 2 is much better.
Yeah, anyways.
Yeah, Carrie Coons is like, I'm like, why are they not giving her more? It's fucking Carrie Coons. She's amazing. But anyway.
Yeah.
So Caroline Astor was born Caroline Webster Schmermer.
Is this
Lord, I swear. Okay.
I feel like
Caroline
it's German.
Astor.
Or like Austrian.
You'll see. Caroline Astor was born Caroline Webster Schermerhorn.
Oh, Schermerhorn. Like the stop on the C train in Brooklyn.
It's probably, Schermerhorn on September 22nd, 1830.
I would like you to say Schermerhorn all day.
Schermerhorn. Schermerhorn in the morning. Burn the beanie meanie.
Whenever I'm sad.
Yes. In 1830, into a wealthy family who were part of New York's Dutch aristocracy.
Okay.
And descendants of the city's original settlers. Hence the stop. You know, it's so funny, like New York, when you live there, you see all these names, and then you hear history and you're like, oh, that's what that was named for.
I was like, Hoyt Schermerhorn. Yeah. Off the sea.
So exactly. And so she was she was born into the Schermerhorn family. Like I said, they were the original settlers. So this is like old money. Okay.
That is the whitest of white.
Yes.
Super white.
Her father, Abraham, born 1783, and the extended family were in shipping, i.e. slavery, allegedly. Whenever they say shipping, I'm like, that sounds like slavery.
Here's what I will say in their not really defense is they probably had no choice. It was
part
of the process.
It's part of the process.
What could you do but then to ship humans and sell them? I mean,
along with wood
yep.
and other goods, right?
You know,
but whenever people say shipping, I'm always like,
nope,
that's a nice word. Which, remember that her family's wealth comes from shipping and a lot of other things. You know, you make money in one way and then you extend to like real estate and all this other stuff. But shipping, so remember that, right? Shipping. Which we say, which probably include human cargoes, slaves.
What? Huh?
So now, at the time of her birth in 1830, Abraham was worth $500,000, equivalent to $12.72 million in 2021 money.
Dang.
Now, so that's her father's side. Her mother's side, her mother was Helen Van Cortlandt.
Cortlandt.
She was born in Cortlandt.
Cortlandt.
She was born in, she was born in 1792, her mother. Okay. Caroline was I've seen some sources say, and a lot of my sources come from Wikipedia, also The Gilded Age, also the podcast, The Gilded Gentleman, which I highly, highly recommend that podcast.
Ooh.
I love it. So some sources say she's the 9th child. Some say she's the 8th child, but it could be that one child died in childbirth. But she's the last child of her parents. At the time of her birth, her family lived at 1 Greenwich Street near Bowling Green.
Ah, yes.
Yep. But the population growth and increasing urbanization of Lower Manhattan in the 1830s led her family to move north to 36 Bond Street, near the ultra fashionable Lafayette Place.
Lafayette.
Which had been developed by her future husband's paternal grandfather, fur trader John Jacob Astor.
Ah, yes. I just have to say, it's so funny because Bond Street and like, where was she before? Like a little further south. That's like 2
Greenwich.
train stops away. Yeah. That's like.
But at that time, this is horse and buggy, so it's a little bit further.
I'm like, where did she? Washington Heights? No, Bond Street.
No.
It's still okay. Yeah.
And these people didn't walk anywhere. They were
God forbid.
Yeah. Now, young Caroline was educated at a school run by Mrs. Bensey, a French immigrant. There she learned how to speak French fluently, as well as other domestic and creative skills that a wife should learn. Now, keep in mind, like Marie Antoinette, like they taught young women how to speak French and the pianoforte, all of that stuff we learned from Jane Austen. But they didn't really teach them about math and science. Oh, God, no.
No.
So they didn't have that kind of, exactly. Yeah. So it's so interesting to me when I found that fact out, like highborn women were educated, but it's not what we would consider like a young woman from a well-off family today to be, because she would have access to all kinds of things.
I mean, it's interesting. You know, it's less information you would get from a public school, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to have a certain amount of math, certain amount of science, certain amount of English, right? Whereas,
I feel like they just taught them enough how to catch a husband,
run a household, and be able to have be an interesting enough conversationalist.
Yeah.
And, write your letters.
Write letters, but also run a house by being able to give, which is an art form. I won't put that down, but to give, you're not actually doing the cooking. You're setting the menu,
Listen.
So it's like cultural, social education.
I would really like to hone my skills in telling other people what to do for me. Yes. I was wondering how I could go about that. I want to be better. I want to better myself.
Yes.
By telling people how to do for me.
Yes.
And take care of me in the way of my liking.
In the way of my liking. It reminds me of like Downton Abbey.
Yes.
And like a lot of, Caroline comes from the family where these people were American, but they still aspired to be like the European, particularly British and French aristocracy. So they taught young girls how to ride horseback or like everything you learn from Bridgerton.
Which is where most
or Jane Austen.
of our education now lies.
Yes. Or a Jane Austen novel. So, but it's just so interesting. That's a good point, Miriam. Like, basically, a basic public school education is far superior than how she'd be taught.
Like a little bit of algebra don't hurt nobody,
Yeah, chemistry. No, they're not teaching her. Her lady brain can't handle that, obviously. No. Miriam, come on. Come on.
It's a girl in there.
It's just boobies. Now, because she was so well born, her dowry was a vast one. Not only was her dowry was a vast one, but she also, after her marriage, maintained her own wealth. Because again, this is old, deep pockets, her money and stuff. So, but because of that, she could be choosy when it came to picking a husband, but not too choosy. She can't marry for love. Oh God, no.
I mean, that's not a thing. Is it?
No. But she could choose, she could wait. So she didn't get married to around 21. So,
my God.
I know.
Ancient.
So, but she could afford to be choosy because she was a great catch from both her parents on both sides were from like deep, like high born people.
Right.
So on September 23rd at 1853, September 23rd, she married William Backhouse Astor Jr. He was born in 1829.
I'm sorry. Backhouse?
Backhouse girl.
Backhouse. No one made fun of him? Not like one kid on the playground?
Okay. I was going to get to that, but I'll get to it here. So she is very snooty. She was raised to be very snooty.
Huh? What?
Right? Now, the Astors, although they had a lot of money, they didn't have the pedigree that she had, right? Her on both sides. Right. So later, after they got married, she told her husband to change his middle name Backhouse because it sounded like a privy.
I'm just saying, it does. I mean, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong.
She might also be a dick, but she's not an incorrect dick.
She's not. Yes. So now her husband, and they married at Trinity Church, again.
That's where Angelica and Eliza are buried. Sorry. I love Hamilton so much. And I know that it's like years outdated, but it's
that's great though you said that because that shows you how like big of a deal the pairing was, like how exclusive these people are. So she, now her husband, William, was the second son, not the first, the second son that'll become important later of William Backhouse Astor Sr. and Margaret.
Sorry, I'm giggling like I'm 12 and I know.
Now, William is the second.
I keep calling him Backhouse. Go on.
So her husband was the second son of William. Okay. Right. William is the son of Jacob, John Jacob Astor. So the Astor.
Jingleheimer Smith. Go on.
Yes. Right. Yes. And William's maternal grandparents were Senator John Armstrong Jr. and Alida, the daughter of Robert Livingston of the Livingston family. So he's not too shabby either. No, but Caroline again, and I feel like she probably came into the marriage knowing this and reminding him of this. And I'm sure his family also reminded him that she's a great catch because of this pedigree. Okay.
Don't fuck this up, boy. Okay.
Yeah. Now, her husband's family, the Astors, made their fortune initially through the fur trade. And then later investing in New York real estate. And again, despite the wealth of the family, she had a superior pedigree. Caroline was considered part of the old Knickerbocker set. Knickerbocker Hotel.
There's a hotel.
Are the original 1600 Dutch settlers of Manhattan family. So again, they're like the blue bloods. This is American blue bloods. Yeah. So by all accounts, her husband, William, didn't consider this a love match either. And eventually he became a philandering fool. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Okay.
Color me shocked. Go on.
I know. Yeah. But they first get married. It's a young couple. They have a lot of money. They're going to have a great life. I just watched Trading Places, and he's like, we're going to have a great life, Penelope, great life. So I love that movie. So they eventually had 5 children: Emily, born in 1853, Helen, born 1855, Charlotte, born 1858, and John, who was born in 1864. So that's their only boy. Side note, he died in the Titanic.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Oof. So, now once John was born, that's the heir, William was like, well, let me see what else is out here that I can get into here. I'm rich. I'm a white man. And I aims to do what I'm going to do. Okay. So, but it's interesting because
white man's going to do what a white man's going to do. Okay.
It's good to be a white man with lots and lots of money in 1864. I'm just saying. Caroline was, like I said, a very, very big snob. She thought she was better than most people, as she was raised to be. To be fair, she was raised since birth to believe this. So the fact that William started philandering and embarrassing her was one thing, but then he seemed to be running around town with lower born women, i.e. actresses, sex workers, women just not on her level.
So if he puts it in someone else, best be rich. Is that the plan? Okay.
Or at least from a good family, right? So it's kind of like,
I mean, how dare you cheat on me with a lower class woman?
I mean, I can understand her point. It's kind of like when your guy cheats on you and you see him and the girl is uglier than you. You're like, really, player?
True.
Really?
Yeah, no, that is true. And it's like, what? Like you like ugly girls?
Yeah.
You like
if you see her and she's gorgeous, you're like, damn it, she's beautiful.
Yeah, that's fine.
Damn it. No. William's like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So this continued to make her, throughout the rest of her life, in this, it humiliated her, but also made her very insecure, which I get. And also that's the thing about these old families. They're not the best looking people it tends to be, because there's a lot of like incest going on.
They keep having to marry a cousin, because only so many crazy rich people in the world. And, we
they don't
cannot be
like,
marrying the actress. Obviously.
They don't look like Lady Mary and Libby from Downton Abbey. They don't they tend not to look like that. So,
that's the reality.
Yeah, that's the reality. So she wasn't like, you definitely would not call her a great beauty. She wasn't an unattractive woman, but when you see the picture, you're like, yeah, that's why.
So when you said she was the catch of the town, you were not talking about anything aesthetic.
No. Well, I think she was probably considered an attractive young lady of that sect. So it's all relative, right?
Ah, yes.
Within the sect of,
That's why he was like, I'm going
girls.
to the actress.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also these women, I hate to say it, but both of them are in a trap because these women were not raised to know about their bodies or sex, and men were not raised to men were raised, socialized to be like, this is my wife. And then these are the other kinds of women who may be more exciting sexually.
Yep.
And
it was not a problem, right?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. He's probably a snob too, but that's the one thing that she has over him though, that she's like from the Knickerbocker sect of New York's elite.
I mean, that sounded French just now, but I mean, that's my snooty sound.
Exactly. Now, so we've heard of the term socialite and society, etc. Now, Caroline Astor did not invent society and socialite and all that other stuff. That existed hundreds of years before, and all of this, the British and the Dutch and everybody thousands of years, exactly, right? But she became the main figure in New York City social circle, that really codified what society, quote unquote, high society meant in America, which was codified in the Gilded Age. So this is also a time where Americans were able to create like high society of American sort of aristocracy, which was modeled on European aristocracy, but it became particularly American.
I mean, we all love a rich snob, right? Like we all love it. We all like look to be that. So Americans like, we can do this too.
We can do this too. And it's like when we think of like, I think of like the preppiness of the 80s and like those would be the children. They would be part of these families that were established, especially during this Gilded Age time. Right. So so they're like, or at least a template on how you become high society.
Yes.
This was established during this time. So
yes. Interesting.
Yeah. So now just a little side note about the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age in America was an American era that roughly ran from 1877 to 1900. Edith Wharton wrote about this.
Yep.
Age of Innocence. It's all about the Gilded Age, and because she was part of this high society group. And so it ran between 1877 to 1900, between the Reconstruction era after the Civil War through the Progressive era, where we start to have like social change.
Yes.
It was a time of rapid economic growth, especially in the northern and western U.S., where American wages grew much higher than those in Europe, especially for skilled workers. And industrialization demanded an ever increasing unskilled labor force. So it's like when you think of like American expansionism and it really sort of happened, or modernization, I should say, happened during this time. So also they lost their slaves. So they're going to need a new source of labor,
which is
and industrialization is kicking up. So to keep the wealth.
This is when, like in Europe, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is they'd say like, come to America for opportunity, the land of freedom and joy. Really, they needed your body to bang on a rock to make the trains go. Yep. And that's whole like land, like I think we still believe it. Oh yeah, the land of opportunity. No, that was a flyer in Ireland.
Literally, yeah.
Like literally, yes.
To get you to come over here because they don't have their slaves anymore.
Nope.
Like, and then
so they need to pay you 5 cents a year.
Exactly. Industrialization is like on like steroids also.
Yeah.
So all this stuff, the railroads, all of that stuff is being built. So it's like, come here, land of opportunity, like you said. And it was called the Gilded Age because even though, again, it's relative. In Europe, what the Americans were offering was a huge pay increase to what, poor people could get in Europe, right?
Right.
It still didn't provide ultimately the kind of money you needed to have like a middle class kind of thing, right?
Well, there was no net. You'd get
there's no
more,
net.
But if you broke your arm or lost a foot, you just died of starvation. There was no net. Exactly.
And that is why that ushers in all of that realization. Once the glass, the rose coloredness is revealed to be not so rose colored, that's when that leads directly to the Progressive Age, where unions,
yes,
working conditions are improved, that kind of thing. But prior to that, the immigrants were just starving, and they were like, they're coming through Ellis Island, land of opportunity. They see this flyer, they come here, and they're at least being fed. They're not hungry. They're not dying of starvation.
Right.
But they are living in tenements.
In squalor. In
squalor. But they're living inside.
Yeah. But
it's crowded. And so initially this was a lot of the Irish population, and then later on Eastern European Jewish population, and then the Italian population, and it sort of comes
That's
in
why
waves.
They all eventually like intermarried. Like when I married an Italian, I was like, is anyone surprised? This is what we do. Please.
And this is why now during this time also socially with high society, they're trying to distinguish themselves from the people who came over on the Mayflower. The people who were here before these immigrants are coming in.
That feels right.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is what you're starting to get. Like people are like, this is where the go back to where you come from starts.
Oh,
even
nice.
among like,
okay.
If you saw, what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese? It's about the draft riots or where white
New York
people just attack all the black people they saw.
Not Gangs of New York.
Yeah, Gangs of New York.
Gangs
That's
of
what
New
it
York,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, because it starts off with the rise, and you don't really realize because they kind of hide it, that the poor Irish immigrants, who are mostly immigrants, were upset that they were being drafted to fight the Civil War, and they thought they were being drafted to protect black people. So then they started attacking random black people on the street.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of hidden in the movie. They don't really tell you what it is. But in that movie, Daniel Day-Lewis's character plays, he keeps saying he's a native, or he says something else. I forget the name. Basically, I was born here. Yeah. And I'm better than you other Irish people that immigrated here. Mm-hmm. Which is so funny because Daniel Day-Lewis in real life is actually Irish, but
fully Irish, very proud, interesting.
But that's where, so even amongst the people, the regular people who are working, this kind of like cultural clash is going on. But to the upper level, they're really frightened because they're like, oh, all these new people, because the new people are coming there because the people who may have the money need the labor. Because again, they don't have free slaves anymore. They don't have slaves anymore. Nope. Or the labor of the slaves in the South. People forget New York benefited a lot from slavery as well. The northern cities.
Sure did.
So
Plan B.
Plan B. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. So socially. Now, the backdrop of all of this, Caroline's life, she's living a whole other life than what most people are, the most of our families were. She's living a life of elegance and high society, balls and parties. But because of all this social anxiety, she's trying to figure out how to distinguish herself and her ilk, right?
Do you ever wonder if she spent more time trying to put money towards science or medicine?
That comes, the women of her status, they start to do that in the progressive era. So it does transition. Because right now it's a matter of like ostentatious wealth. The income tax is not implemented yet.
I know. It's actually against the law.
Yeah. So all the money they're making, they're keeping.
Yeah,
so they can build these insane, huge mansions. Like it's insane. It's like insane wealth, right? But they can say, well, I'm not an aristocracy. I'm actually making this money. I'm a working person. But it's I
work so hard 3 hours a day telling people what to do and how to do it.
It's like when I watched, I used to watch Beverly Hills Housewife, and I remember Camille Grammer, when she was on there, she was complaining about building or moving her house to her house in Hawaii or something. And she's like, I'm so exhausted. I need a vacation.
Well, she is so relatable. I mean, like all of us.
It's so exhausting. So, now prior to so Caroline in the beginning, she was just like a rich lady from a rich family, blue blood family, right?
Okay.
But her husband started all his philandering, so she put all her focus on her 5 children. Now, when her first daughter, Emily, in 1872, was her debutante year. So she came of age, and for these families, this is very important. We've all watched, Jane Austen. So these the debutante year is very important for these kinds of families. And again, she's the wife of the second son of the famous Astor, of a famous Astor son. She's not the first wife. So she wanted to do something that would distinguish her daughter and her family and make sure that it was successful. So enter Ward McAllister. He was born in 1827. He's a lawyer from a formerly wealthy judicial Southern family from Savannah, Georgia. Slaves. He was just as much of a snob as her, but his family's fortune had taken a turn because they lost most of their wealth, which were their slaves.
Oh, no.
Labor.
I'm so sorry.
I know. My tiny violin.
It's so tiny.
Tiny violin.
We'll play it for you if you'd like.
So Ward, now he probably sounded like this. I say.
Okay, that's a little Foghorn Leghorn.
I say, boy, listen to me when I'm talking to you.
Right.
No. So he was raised a gentleman, on a plantation, which is a work camp. A plantation is a fucking work camp.
It's a work camp. Don't have your weddings on it. It was a work camp.
It's a work camp with a.
Are you having a wedding at Auschwitz? No. So same thing.
Don't do it. Don't do it. It's a work camp.
Throwing it out there.
Yeah. So his family's wealth has gone. I mean, he was trained as a lawyer, so he's probably working as that. But he also understood manners and how to comport yourself because that's how he was raised.
Did you just say that he has to work for a living?
I know,
God,
right?
That's so terrible. I am so sorry.
And when they say he didn't have the kind of money, because I'm going to tell you a quote he says later. So he wasn't, again, my tiny violin. So
it's getting smaller. Go on.
Yeah, it's getting smaller. So she turns to him. Now, they were related through marriage on the Astor side. So his first cousin married into the Astor side. So they were married. They were related through marriage. He helped guide her through the debutante year for Emily.
Okay.
And it went really well. Just he understood, like, you don't do this, you don't do that, how to make the best impression for Emily to make the best impression as well as the family.
Got it. Okay.
But those two became thick as thieves because they both were uber snobs.
Isn't everyone else worse than us? Yes, they are.
Now, he thinks of himself as, high society without the money, but he wanted desperately to be part of high society in New York.
Okay.
And he adored money, and Caroline had a lot of damn money. So he thought of her, they became thick as thieves. She thought of him that he could help her. They could be partners in crime, but she could also be a good vehicle for him to finally be accepted in high society. So what they decided to do was to come up with to make high society. So. Okay. You ready?
Let's do this. Okay.
So for us lay people, or us regular people, in 1872, that same year that Emily came out, after that was successful, they sat down, Caroline and Ward McAllister sat down and came up with the rules for the Gilded Age. Wow. It was a list.
Did they call it the rules for the Gilded Age?
They called it the Society of Patriarchs. So they made a list.
I don't know what to say about that.
They made a list of people who they considered legitimate part of fashionable society, and they called it the Society of Patriarchs. Okay. Now, Caroline believed. Okay, so they did this. So the Society of Patriarchs. So they wanted to, because this is to distinguish not only from that social stuff that's going on with all the immigrants, but to distinguish themselves from like new money. Oh God, new money, right? Craftspeople. So they wanted to keep the riffraff out, basically, who just because you had a lot of money didn't mean you were part of society.
Obviously not.
Ward McAllister once said that, quote, $1 million was respectable poverty. $1 million in 1872, which I didn't have time to look up, but
it's like $95 million or some shit.
Like
I need a minute. I would like to have respectable poverty. That's what I would like. My wish upon a star is for respectable poverty, Ward McAllister.
Respectable poverty.
Maybe one day I will be respectably impoverished.
Now, in addition to this notion about money, Caroline herself believed that it took 4 generations of men behind you to make a gentleman.
Oh, what that? But it's what? Okay, that's impossible. Unless you're Caroline. Astor.
Schermerhorn.
Schermerhorn. Unless you're a stop on the C train, you are not going to get there.
Now, this is what she thought. But her own husband and his brother did not live up to this standard. Because her husband, again, the grandfather is the one that made the money. So technically, his father would be the first, and then her husband would be the second, right? The second generation.
That's only the second generation.
Yes. Yeah. So, now also because John Jacob Astor was a little bit a side note about him. He was a poor German immigrant who got into the fur trading business, had a lot of success, and then expanded it to real estate. Okay. And that is the reason why the Astors are so, her husband's family is so wealthy. But he did that all he did that himself. So, yeah. I mean, he did it in fur and not shipping. So I'm just saying. Yeah, no, I'm just saying, Caroline.
I might like him better, honestly.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And he, by all accounts, he was like, I'm rich, bitches. So the grandfather, John Jacob Astor, was known to be kind of crass. And he would wipe his hands on the garments of a lady sitting next to him at dinner, not on his napkin or on the tablecloth.
Oh
but
my
on the
God.
ladies.
What an asshole.
Grandpa's ass. He don't give a fuck.
What a dick.
He's like, I got money, bitches. I got
money. What you gonna
do? So they came up with these rules, right? Okay. Of what constitutes a gentleman. So she thought it took 4 generations of wealth. So on this list, she decided that they were going to throw a ball, and they were going to invite 25 of these gentlemen who passed these requirements.
So her husband's not invited.
No, her husband and his brother are on it. They let that slide.
Okay.
And then those 25 gentlemen would then invite 5 more gentlemen each and 4 ladies each.
Why only 4 ladies?
Because,
Yeah, I do.
Lady parts. So, which equaled about 375 people.
Thank you for doing the math. I could not.
Those 375 people became high society in New York City.
Wow.
Now, later in an interview, so there's most people say about 400 because in an interview, Ward was, talking because he loved this being considered the gatekeeper of high society. He said that there were only about 400 people. 400 people that he thought were part of high society. And that was the number of people who could fit into Caroline Astor's New York City ballroom.
Well, I know when I throw a ball, I have to cap it as well. So I understand that. Caroline and I are the same.
Yeah, you and her are the same.
We are the same.
The thing is that they just came up with this and it worked.
Pulled it out of their assholes.
Yep.
And
it worked.
Fucking worked.
Everyone flocked around her and she became the foremost authority in the aristocracy of New York in the late 19th century.
Oh my God.
Now, you could be considered part of society, but you can also, there's no guarantee you would stay a part of society.
Oh shit.
So any public scandal, faux pas, or anything that would cause, or if you insulted her or she didn't like you personally, you could be ostracized.
I mean,
and you would be ostracized by no party invitations for you or your children, to any of the season social gatherings. If she did like you, she had an annual ball that she would have in her ballroom. Obviously. And if you got an invitation to that every year, that meant you were still in society.
So if people were they were waiting for their invitation, it hasn't arrived yet.
No, seriously.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I would hope that I wouldn't care, because if I had billions of dollars, which is essentially how they had their money, right? That's never ending pot of money. I would just do my thing. I would open a theater. We would tour. I don't know.
But see, that's the thing about the idle rich is they're idle for a reason. There's nothing for them to do but go on vacation together with each other. That's and true. You can't hang out with the masses. No.
I think, Lavetta, you hit the nail on the head. They're bored.
Yeah.
They have nothing else
to do.
Think about.
Yeah. And most of their lives are spent within a 10 or 15 block radius with other wealthy families. They couldn't really go out
That's
into
true.
The world. Even when they went to Europe on vacation, they vacationed at the same place. They go to Connecticut. They go there together. Have you seen White Lotus?
Girl, I've seen White Lotus. I'm a human in this world. I've seen White Lotus. Come on.
You know how Tanya says, oh, these are high end gays. It's good to be with people who have money because then you don't worry about them wanting your money.
Girl, okay, I don't want to spoil anything about White Lotus, but when she said that line, I was like, oh, she's fucked. That's all I'm going to say.
But that's what it is. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, this meant a big, big deal. Like, to be in the society because, and then if you're new money, you want to get in because that means you've arrived. Because women of this caliber, women of this ilk, they don't have like career aspirations. Their success is in getting their children married and to, into, successful matches and keeping the family's reputation.
See,
going.
I would just fuck it up. Like I would like open a theater and
well, you
like,
know
my
what,
poor
Miriam?
children.
Because we come from bad stock. We come from low-born stock.
The low end. I was like, you describe the people at my family, they were in the Lower East Side tenements.
Yeah, and my family were the newly freed slaves.
Right,
like, literally.
exactly. So we were all very hungry.
Yes. We're just worried about eating and having a warm house and having food on the table. And then as a Black person, not getting murdered by some random white person.
Right. And as a Jewish person, it's like the diseases, many diseases.
That's what we're worried about.
Yeah.
So we had other stuff. So
yeah, I wasn't really worried about her invitation to the ball.
No. So, oh my God. You got to finish The Gilded Age.
I do. The Gilded Age. You know what? I'm probably going to do that tonight. I'm going to finish it because I'm super inspired.
You know why? It's so hard because you're like, these are not high stakes. So how do you make this kind of stuff high stakes?
Well, I don't remember the names of anybody, but the woman who wants to be a writer, she's like the only one
the Black
I care
lady?
about. Yeah. But I'm so worried about her.
Now, keep in mind, her family's well off. Have you gotten that part? Like, she goes back to Brooklyn. Her family lives in Brooklyn. Her family's well off because they have their own business.
No shit.
Da-da-da. Yeah, when the niece goes back, she assumes that she's poor, but when she arrives, they live in like this beautiful brownstone. And like, they're
awesome.
like well off. Like, but she's a Black woman, so her entree into high society, that's not going to happen. So her people, because Black people have their own social hierarchy. That's a whole nother thing. But she can be like, oh, I want to, instead of having babies, I want to like write. I want to get myself published. Like, you know.
Like, I really want her to get published. But everything else feels like less, and like, listen, Christine Baranski is my favorite person.
I mean, Queen Christine Baranski.
Like, come on. She's the best.
But even her, like, I'm watching it, I'm like, you got to give Christine and my girl,
what's her name?
Cynthia Nixon. And like, you're like, you got these like brilliant actors, like you got to give them more to do. So anyway, we digress, but I'm hoping that season 2 gets a little bit better because as the season goes on, it got a lot more interesting, but so back to Caroline Astor. So it worked. Her and Ward McAllister, this whole kind of thing worked. Now, the whole point of this was to kind of keep out the new money. And the new money during this time were the Vanderbilts.
Oh, yeah, the Pasha Vanderbilts.
Now, today, the Vanderbilt are blue bloods to us. They have foundations, philanthropic endeavors, and of course, the University, Vanderbilt University, old money to us. Yeah. But in the Gilded Age, they were considered new money. And they had a lot of money. The money came from railroads and then other things. But now, remember I said that Caroline Astor's family, Schermerhorns, were like shipping?
Yes.
The Vanderbilts made their money in railroads, and Caroline Astor detested railroad money.
Why?
It wasn't the right kind of money.
You couldn't port slaves on them? Was that a problem?
I don't know. It's not. But you're just like, really, girl? Okay. Now, okay, girl. So enter Alva Vanderbilt, which is one of the characters that's kind of loosely based on her in The Gilded Age. Alva Vanderbilt was the wife of horse breeder and railroad manager William Kiss Vanderbilt. So he's part of the Vanderbilts. Okay. So the two women went toe to toe a while because Caroline was not letting her in because she's new money. But eventually she realized that the Vanderbilts were getting a lot of growing social influence.
Yeah.
So she realized that to bring Alva in eventually would be to her benefit. And they dramatize this a bit in the Gilded Age, the latter part of the season that you haven't seen yet.
Okay. I see the beginning when she's like, no, absolutely not.
Yes.
I don't know why they're British in my head. They just are.
Well, because they're kind of doing that mid-Atlantic kind of thing. I could I don't know what that is, terrible accent.
Well, I don't. I say it is what? Hey. There's no word
say not
out of my mouth. I'm just making sounds.
Yeah, I just think of Dan Aykroyd. Penelope, I don't know.
Exactly.
Now, I'm almost finished here, but I've been referring to Caroline Astor as Mrs. Astor. That's what people thought of her as. That's what she's known in history as. But actually, that giving her that moniker was a faux pas. And it was a faux pas that she made when she started using it.
What?
Again, remember when I said that, again, these rich people problems. Remember when I was saying that she's married to the second son of John Jacob Astor?
Yes.
That meant that, or the second son of John Jacob Astor's son. So that meant that she didn't have the right to use the phrase Mrs. Astor. That was designated for the wife of the first son.
What?
Not the second.
What? You could do that?
That was like social hierarchy. That's kind of how it works, right?
So what was your last name supposed to be?
She was referred to as like Mrs. William Astor. She couldn't be known as Mrs. Astor only. It's kind of like saying she's the Thee Astor.
Okay.
The Mrs. Astor.
Well, okay.
Yes. So
I have so much respect for these things. Can you tell?
I know, girl. So when she was married to William, so she was known as Mrs. William Astor. That's her proper title.
Okay.
And again, they have cards printed with their names on it.
Obviously.
So when you go and visit people, hers initially said Mrs. William Astor, but after her sister-in-law died, she had it changed to Mrs. Astor.
Oh, damn, girl. Okay.
Yes. So when Charlotte, her sister-in-law, her brother-in-law's wife, Charlotte died in 1887, Caroline started using Mrs. Astor. Again, Charlotte's son, William Waldorf Astor, was
that makes sense.
No. He was like, that should go to my wife because now that my father's died, I'm head of the household in a sense. So he kind of surpasses in family status his uncle in that sense because he's kind of like the British royal family.
Yeah.
Like Harry is the second son. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kate outranks Meghan because she's the wife of the first son, that kind of thing, right? So
I feel almost bad that I understand it, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, I know. So William, and I see his point, which is, again, that Charlotte's son. He's just like, no, my wife should get that title now. So Caroline's like, okay. But his wife was named Mary, but Mary was 18 years younger than Caroline.
Okay.
And she didn't have nearly the social standing. She's just a young wife. She probably didn't really care about that kind of stuff. But her nephew was like, my wife should have that title, that moniker. So again, his father died. So his mother dies in 1887. Caroline, his aunt, starts using the Mrs. Astor moniker. Now his father dies in 1890. So William insisted that she stop using it so his wife could use it. Caroline's like, too bad, too sad. I'm not going to stop using it because that's what people know me from.
Yep.
So
that feels right.
This caused a bit of a rift in the family. And so William, like rich people do, he tore down his father's mansion, which was right next to Caroline's mansion. So basically the two brothers lived next door to. He tore down his father's mansion and built the Waldorf Hotel next to it.
Shut up. Okay. Wow. He is here to play.
I gotta admire his pettiness. I love it, actually. I gotta love it.
No, I really do appreciate him.
Now, of the Waldorf Hotel, she referred to it apparently as the glorified tavern next door.
Well, if someone built a huge ass hotel right next to my house, I would probably try to mock it as well.
Now, it also pissed off his other neighbors because it started to overpower not only her mansion but other rich people's mansions.
Yeah, it's like a rich people neighborhood situation.
Yeah. She still didn't budge, so he and his family eventually moved to England. William Waldorf Astor, he and his family moved to England, and he eventually became a viscount. So he got a title there. Okay. In retribution, Caroline and her son Jack tore down their mansion and built the Astoria Hotel.
Oh my God.
And then they built 2 different mansions nearby.
Shut up. So the Waldorf Astoria. Okay.
Later, the 2 hotels combined and became the Waldorf Astoria, but that was the original site of it because the original Waldorf Astoria was torn down in 1928 to make room for the Empire State Building.
Oh, well, now I know exactly where they are. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. It's just, rich people. Man,
when
money.
You have too much money, that is too much money.
Yeah.
Man, they were like, fuck the poor. They really were. I mean,
I will say this, that the Waldorf, that hotel was it was scandalous because it was the first time that like people in polite society didn't mix with the regular people in public. They only did it in private homes like ballrooms. Oh. So it's actually kind of interesting because he started this hotel, which was kind of scandalous on its own, that you could just pay and stay
in the
at
neighborhood.
This place.
Yeah.
And so, but it kind of like inadvertently like led to sort of like not middle class, but like I don't know, regular rich people being able to have access to this kind
world.
Of rarefied air. Which is so interesting that, rich people acting up. So it was later torn down, like I said, and the Empire State Building stands there now. Wow. And then they moved the newer Waldorf is, I forget where it's at. But anyway,
I don't stay there very often. So
by the time, they built the Astoria and then they started building mansions. So by the time her new mansion that was facing Central Park at the corner of 65th Street. So 65th Street and Central Park. She for a time she stayed with her husband, Jack, and his much, I'm sure, to the detriment of his wife. Her son, she stayed with her son and much to the detriment of her son's wife.
That's terrible.
Because I bet she was a handful. But her husband had died and she began to have some health problems because she's getting older. Okay. By this time too, she had endured many years. She went through a period of mourning. Her husband died and then her daughter, Helen, had died. Oof. So her husband died in 1892 and then Helen died in 1893. So she survived one of her children.
That's awesome.
Because of that, she went through like a couple years of mourning. And so she moved back from society. So she was away. So society changed. And so when she reemerged, the rules had kind of changed on her. She was kind of considered like old hat, she didn't have as much sway as she once had, but she was still considered, some of the younger women, treated her like the queen bee she was, gave her flowers, and some of them didn't. But things had changed on her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it's the matter. It's fine. It's like now.
I mean, it's the same generational thing that happens to everyone, right? It's like you're cool until you're not cool anymore because other people are younger.
They're younger. And then because you don't have a grasp on like an iron fist on it, things change under you easily, so I would say when she came back probably like 18 like the mid 1890s, like 1895, 1896, things had kind of changed on her. Now, she died on October 30th, 1908 at the age of 70.
Ooh, okay.
And following her death, by all accounts, it took 3 women to take her place in New York society. Mrs. Fish, Mrs. Ulrichs, and Mrs. Belmont. So it took 3 high society women to replace the kind of influence and hold that she had on high society as Mrs. Caroline Astor.
Wow.
So that is Caroline Astor.
She took the bull by the reins, so to speak. Like and I gotta say, I don't have the most amount of sympathy for very, very rich people, but she didn't actually have any real freedom within her riches. Yeah. It's not like she could go off and study the things she wanted to study. She kind of had, it sounds like she kind of had to.
They were in a gilded cage in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like Edith Wharton talks about that. That's what a lot of her writing's about. And she's basically like, they just could only travel in the city about, 10 to 14 blocks. That's why they would go to Europe a lot. Like they would go to Europe and or go to Connecticut because they couldn't really do anything.
I would lose my fucking mind.
Yeah.
And then no one would sympathize with me because I would be very, very rich.
Yeah. Some people fall into that trap nowadays. Like sometimes I'll see people who are, and it doesn't mean you don't have depression or bad things don't happen in your life, but I'm like, you see it with celebrities. I'm like, you have so much money. Why are you getting into arguments with people on Twitter?
Yeah, right? Don't you have a yacht to be on or something?
I've been laying butt ass naked on a white sandy beach.
That you own.
With sexy men's that I own.
That you also
with
own.
Sexy men's giving me foot rubs every fucking day.
They just love you so much. Like you own them because they're hard to take.
I would be on yachts. I would be on spa retreats. I would be on mountains in Maui. I would not be arguing with people on Twitter.
No, I would not. I would be. I have a tour of Southeast Asia I would like to go on. I'm busy.
Yes. Because now when you're rich, you can actually travel around, but also because socially we are not restricted in that sense, right? I would imagine there are people who still feel restricted because they have to vacation here to be considered still ultra, cool and rich and in the know. And it's like, no, I'd be going, I want to go to Southeast Asia so bad. I go back to Japan. I
want to go to Japan. I have no money, but no. And that's the thing is that still exists, I think. Mm-hmm. But we also know that it's a fallacy.
Yes.
And it's known. So you can follow that, but you absolutely don't have to in a way that they kind of absolutely did have to. They'd lose everything.
Yeah.
They
would. That's probably why they kept building mansions, which they then had to during the progressive era. And then some of them went into disrepair, but they had to cut them up and these huge brownstones in New York were formerly parts of these huge mansions that took up whole boulevard blocks.
It's amazing to look at now in New York. You're the apartments, and these apartments, by the way, are generally extremely expensive, ridiculous. And they are 1/20th of what it was.
Yep.
And there's still $5 million.
Yeah, exactly. Insane amounts of money. So, but I just thought she was a really interesting character. Because again, on this podcast, it's about, you're notorious. She was notorious because she was a bully. I mean, she was a mean girl. She was a Gilded Age mean girl. Yep.
Yes. What's the lead character of Mean Girls? What's her name? Not the lead, not Lindsay Lohan.
Rachel McAdams plays.
She is Rachel McAdams.
Yep.
In Mean Girls.
Yep.
That's who she is.
That's who she is. So that's Caroline Astor. But
Awesome.
well, that wraps up another episode of Notorious Women. Guys, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and email us. And Miriam, do you want to tell them where?
I super do. I'm looking it up because I don't want to mess it up. That's the truth. You can follow us on Instagram. Please follow us on Instagram, Notorious Women Podcast. And also our Gmail is notoriouswmpod@gmail.com. Email us your thoughts, your ideas, your ladies, if you will. Yeah.
If you have any questions. And also, don't forget to give us 5 stars. 5 stars.
It's 5
stars.
You have a choice of 1 to 5. You want to choose 5.
5. No, you have a choice between 5 and 5.
I'm sorry. You're right. I did not read the room correctly. You could choose 5 or you could choose 5. Cool. Thank you.
All right, guys. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.